Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. Okay, everybody, welcome back. I am joined by my friend. You know what happens at 3 o'clock on every Friday. It is the Candace Plattor Show with my friend Candace Plattor. Hi, Candace.
Hi, Casey. Hi, everyone.
So, Candace, you were hitting it out of the park last week. We were talking about a bunch of different things, but what I want to do first, before we get into, I want to ask you about the holidays, because this is tough for families and even for addicts. I know sometimes, I might make a comment or something that, and I should take a page from your book. I don't mean to put down or the addict or anything. I am not doing that, even if it sounds like that when I use that term, because I know exactly what these people are going through. But after you go through the work, you find out you're really hurting those other people, if not as much as you're hurting yourself. You're hurting them more, the people that love you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. I think everybody gets hurt. I don't even know who gets hurt more.
Right.
What I do know is that the family members, most of them anyway, aren't using addiction to stuff their own feelings down, or not the kind of addiction that the addicts are using. So, the addicts may not be feeling the pain as much because of what they're doing, and the family members might feel it a whole lot more because they're not doing the same thing as the addicts are. But everyone is affected, and the thing is that everybody in that circle needs to heal. Everybody's affected. Everybody needs to heal.
Mm-hmm. And what about as a learned behavior? I know we become adults, and we question things that we grew up in and we learned. Take, for instance, there's an alcoholic grandfather gave birth to a father alcoholic, and now the son is an alcoholic, and it's affecting the younger person's life, but you're not going to really get any help from the father because he was brought up that way. A man drinks. What are you crying about? This isn't a problem, but clearly is. How do you help somebody like that?
Yeah. So, generationally, it does run in families sometimes. There isn't any real proof yet scientifically about whether this is a genetic predisposition. I think there may be a genetic predisposition because I see it running in families. But but sometimes it skips a generation, and sometimes one sibling is affected and another one isn't. And
Right.
I mean, it's just such a kind of a crapshoot, right? You
Yeah.
just really don't know how that's going to happen. And the scientists have had a hard time proving one way or the other. But I think it's a lot about what you've just said, actually, Casey, because what we learn in the home and what we're allowed to get away with, behaviors that people are allowed to get away with, when the addicts are allowed to get away with really bad behavior and then they have children, the children see the alcoholic father getting away with this, being enabled, people just allow this. They think to themselves, okay, well, I can do it too then.
Yeah.
If I don't feel good, if I'm unhappy, I can take a drink. I can shoot something into my arm. I can go shopping and spend more money than I'll ever have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's hard to tell the difference between the nature and the nurture.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that whether it's nature, whether it's nurture, whether it runs in families, whether it's a genetic thing, whether it's a disease, underneath, which I don't actually buy into the disease model, but underneath all of that is the choice that the addict makes about whether to stay in active addiction or come out of that and go into some kind of recovery and heal and understand themselves so that they don't have to keep hurting themselves and the people around them. So you've got the grandfather who didn't do any of that. He made the choice to stay in addiction. Maybe nobody ever said to him, there's another way, So he stayed in active addiction. The father stayed in active addiction because maybe nobody said to him, there's another way. Here's the son. We're in today. We're not back in 1935 when the 12 steps were written, for example. We're in today. And what we know today is that whatever you believe about addiction, underneath all of that, it's really not about the addiction. It's about the choice we make to stuff our feelings down because we just can't handle life. And are we going to keep doing that, or are we going to stop doing that?
100%. Yeah. And I would argue that's why your practice has been so effective and successful, is because your program doesn't buy into, oh, I have this horrible disease that's got control of me and I can't do anything about
I
it.
can't help it. I'm an addict. I can't
come
help it.
on.
No, that's just not the case. You can
Yeah,
control it.
totally.
If you choose to control it, you can control it. And if you choose not to control it, you won't control it.
Right.
And it's so important for families of addicts to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're a family member and thinking that your addict has a disease that she can't control, that they're always going to be like that. I am 35 years clean and sober. I was an opioid addict for 15 years without even realizing that I was one. If I can change, if I can go into addiction, after being suicidal and so many different things that happened in my life, if I can change, anybody can change, basically.
And throw on, you got a very painful disease that you can't just say, I don't want this anymore.
Yeah, Crohn's. Yeah. So it's different from what people like to call the disease of addiction, because I can't get rid of Crohn's, at least not yet. And I've tried for a lot of years to get rid of Crohn's. If you want to be out of addiction, you can be out of addiction. It's simple, but it's not easy because there's work involved in doing it. It's not just, oh, I'm not going to use anymore. Life is going to be wonderful. There's some work to do around that. But, the way, even the pain of the work that needs to be done is so much less than the pain of what the addict is going through with addiction. Oh, being an active addiction is just not a picnic.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a picnic. So if you're the loved one, you might want to look at some of your own enabling behaviors, like allowing the addict to get away with this and not holding them accountable. And, in my book, I talk about this a lot. So if you're enabling, what needs to happen is for you to get underneath that. What makes you feel like enabling is a good thing to do when you kind of know that that's going to keep the addict stuck? When did you decide, when did you learn, when you were a child maybe, that being a people pleaser, being codependent, saying yes when you mean no, was the way to keep yourself safe?
Yeah.
And how can you change that so that the addict has a fighting chance of recovering and you can live a better life?
Yeah.
That's the work that I do with people.
Got it. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you, and I think it kind of proves everything that you were just saying, is that going back into the 12 steps, I can remember there's one part, and I had a real problem with this one. They say, you want to find out if you're an alcoholic. Okay, take a simple test. Have one drink in front of you, drink that drink, and then after that, don't have another one for 24 hours or something like that. If you can do that, that means that you're not an alcoholic. I thought that was the biggest crock of.
Yeah. I know what you're thinking it was a crock of.
But they say that in the book. That's what they say. Take the test.
I know. And they also say that some people are constitutionally incapable of recovering, and that's not true either.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the big book says that some people are constitutionally incapable of making, a different choice or doing things differently. And that's not true.
So it means
We are
forever
all
they'll be an addict forever? That's what that means?
that's I think that's what that means. Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot in the 12-step dogma. I mean, the 12-step programs have some really good things in them,
Yeah.
like fellowship and sponsorship and events to go to when you're abstinent. I loved those
It
things
helped
when I
you
was in them.
in the
Yeah, they
beginning.
definitely helped me.
Yeah.
But the dogma, the teachings, you have a disease, because they think that, because the brain is involved in addiction, which of course it is, but because the brain is involved, that makes it a brain disease. I don't buy that at all.
Yeah.
I know what a
Mm.
disease feels like. So, and we're programmed as humans. There's brain involvement in every single thing we do. So that doesn't translate into addiction being a disease. And they also say that we're powerless over this disease,
Yeah.
and that we're going to relapse, because relapse is a normal and natural part of recovery. And I think saying those things to an addict who can then say those things to his family, I think that's dangerous.
Cop out.
I I think it takes the responsibility away from the addict, and it leaves the family just hopeless,
Right.
when really the addict is the one that has the full responsibility of what choice they're going to make. I'm sure they didn't make the choice to go into addiction. Nobody does that. Nobody says, I'm going to be an addict. That's going to be lots of fun.
It's gonna be great.
But that'll be great. Let's
Yeah.
party all the time, because we know when we're addicts, we know that using addiction, being stuck in addiction, is really not a party. They
They're
like
not
to
having
call
fun
it
anymore.
partying. Yeah, I mean, it's not partying. It's really miserable, and it's really hard to be in addiction, and it's really hard to be the family member of an addict. So, to take that responsibility away from the addict to make the choice to come out of this, and for the family to feel like there's just nothing they can do, none of that is true.
Right.
I'm here to tell you, none of that is true.
And that's where you come in, and Love with
That's
Boundaries is born.
that is where I come in. My company is called Love with Boundaries, because we do need to love the addicts that are in our lives. They need us to love them. We need to love them, but we need to be healthy in that love.
Yeah.
And so love with boundaries, because we have to have boundaries when we're dealing with an addict or anybody else, but especially with an addict.
Very true. Very true. Now,
Yeah.
before I get to the questions here, I want to talk to you about holidays.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts on holidays and addiction? I just
Mm.
leave it broad, and then I have a couple more precise questions I'd like to ask you.
Okay. We may want to talk about the holidays in a few of our shows, Casey,
Uh,
because I don't know that we'll get to everything today. But there are maybe 3 or 4 areas that confound families. They just don't know what to do, how to handle it, and it's totally understandable that they wouldn't know how. There's so little help for you out there if you're a family member. So one of them is, do I invite the addict to our family function? Whether we're having it at our house or we're going out somewhere, do we invite the addict? And that's only if we know where the addict is. There are families at the holiday season that haven't been in touch with the people who are addicted in their lives, and miss them so much and wish they could have contact with them, and have no idea how to get hold of them. So that's kind of the flip side of that one.
mhm.
But for the families who, yeah, there's a lot of grieving that goes on, especially during the holiday
Yeah.
season. For families that are wondering whether to invite, you know, there's an answer to that. It's a little long-winded. I can start the answer, and maybe next week we can talk more about it. If people are interested, they come back and
Sure.
hear some more. But if you're going to invite the addict to your function, there need to be boundaries set and maintained.
Okay.
And if your family, everybody in your family, can be like a united front for those boundaries, that everybody's going to agree to them and go along with them. This is hard. this kind of consensus can be hard to come to in a family, but the more that can happen. So, for example, you say to the person, we really want you to be at our dinner. We love you so much. We miss that you're not around much. We'd love you to be there. If you do decide to come, you need to be clean and sober when you show up. You need to not drink or use while you're with us. Right? If you do get drunk or wasted, we'll take your keys and so you give them the consequence as well. We'll take your keys, we'll call you a cab or an Uber, and off you'll go.
Beforehand.
Because, well, if you're at our dinner and you start to get obnoxious or drunk or whatever, we're going to take your keys and we're going to put you, we'll slide you into a car and you're going to go home, because we love you so much and we hate seeing you in that state, and we're not going to do that again.
Okay. So you
We're going to
set the
support
boundaries early.
we're going to support your recovery, not your addiction. Yes, you say that to them way before
Got it.
they're going to come
Got
to
it.
your function, so that they can choose. Can I stay clean and sober for 3 hours? I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure I want to. How dare they tell me that I have to, and they can go through that whole thing and then make that decision for themselves. If they make the decision to come, they know what they have to do. They know what's going to happen if they don't do it.
You mean they got to be accountable?
Uh-huh. It's the most loving thing that a family can do for an addict, is to be accountable, is to hold them accountable.
Got it.
Not a punishment.
Right.
It's the way the world works.
Yeah.
Right?
And they know what's going to
And
happen before. If you make this decision, this is what's going to happen. So
that's right.
like you
That's
weren't
right.
told, this isn't a surprise.
That's right. Exactly. And so if they come and they get drunk or high or whatever, and you load them into a car, there's a really better chance that the next time they come to a family function, they won't do that.
Mm.
And maybe you want to have a 3 strikes and you're out policy for a while. Like, if you do that twice, you got 1 more strike. If you use it, we're not even going to invite you until you are in recovery.
Okay.
Until you make that choice. So you close the door, but you don't lock it.
Got it.
You never lock it, but you give them the choice of going into recovery. That's what you're looking for.
Sounds fair.
That's what you want to support them in. And when we make it too comfortable for an addict to stay in active addiction, when we enable them like that, why would they choose recovery? So stop enabling.
Got it.
Read my book, Stop Enabling. This is my book, by the way.
Where do people get that?
People can get that. It's probably the best ideas on Amazon. Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself, the top 10 survival tips for loving someone with an addiction. And if you're the family members, you're going to see yourselves on so many of these pages. And you're also going to learn some ways to shift what you're doing to make it healthier and better for you and for the addict.
Mm. Another thing about the holidays, if you're having other people, it's kind of not in reality where you have no alcohol in the house, right? I mean, because if it's just your family and your family doesn't really drink, or I guess maybe that's a sacrifice that they can make. They'll have the wine with dinner or whatever. But if there are other people coming from all over the place, is that enabling, because you're making all these other people sacrifice what they normally would do because the addict is coming? What do you think about that?
Well, I'm really on the fence with that. I like it when the compromise is made. You said sacrifice. I like to look at it as a compromise. If you're asking the addict to do something different so that there can be a good time had in this event, if you're asking the addict to do something different and you're not willing to do something different, it's kind of unfair. But so if it's a family, like an immediate family, that can have alcohol put to the side, that isn't going to bring out a joint when they sit around the fire, to be able to help the addict stay clean during that event and sober, That's terrific. I think that would be such a great thing. But if you're inviting people from far and
You
wide
got
and they're all
Jane and Bill
drinkers,
from Texas flying in. You
yeah,
don't know what they're.
yeah. Well, then I think you'd have to have that conversation with the addict when you're setting these boundaries. You need to say, most of us are not going to be drinking. We've got Uncle Joe from Texas coming in, and he's probably going to be drinking. So you need to decide whether you're going to be okay sitting at a table where there's alcohol.
Good idea.
And we hope that you think you can be.
Yeah.
We'd like you to try because we'd love to have you there. We love you so much. We'd love to have you there. But it's up to you, and we'll understand if you feel like that's too much of a temptation for you.
And this communication thing seems to work, huh?
Naming things, communicating, doing it in a loving way instead of saying, if you come to our dinner and you drink, you're out of there. You don't want to come from that place. You
I
want to come
got it.
from that loving place of, we really would love to have you there. And not even but, and there are boundaries that we're setting this year.
Well, it's this is their home, so I would think that they're in every right to, to that's
What,
completely fair.
for the families or for
Yeah,
the
for the
addicts?
for the family. I mean, if
For the family.
we're
Yeah,
inviting you over to our place, and this,
that's right.
you know,
Yeah. If that's the situation, I mean, sometimes the addicts are living in the family home.
right?
And so it's just, this is why, we can't answer all of it like in
Yeah,
one
there's no
talk, but
cookie cutter, right?
there really isn't a cookie cutter, but there are other things that we can talk about that will make it easier for families to hopefully be together with their addict, even if they're in active addiction still.
Got it. Yeah, let's continue to talk about this next time because we have a minute left, and I'd still like to at
Oh,
least one question. So
sure.
so
Yeah.
let's go to audience for one question. Miss Producer, can I do that? Can I do one? Okay. All right.
All right, we have an anonymous just came in, says, how should we handle it if the addict says that we're the reason they're addicted in the first place?
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, I mean, first of all, that's a very common thing for an addict to do to a family. Um, I say don't buy into that. That's gaslighting. And what gaslighting means is that somebody takes their pain and slimes you with it. That's basically what gaslighting is. So it's impossible for you to be the cause or the cure of somebody else's addiction, because we live on a planet of free will and addicts make their choices all the time. It doesn't matter when I say it doesn't matter, it matters. But in this case, it doesn't matter what you've done, what you've said, what you haven't done or said. The addict still has a choice to make about how they're going to live their own life. That has really virtually nothing to do with you.
Yeah, got it. Hey,
And that's a hard thing for people to wrap their heads around, but that's really how it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Candace Platter, always love when you come on, and I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody on the questions, but we'll do one show completely for questions, so we will get to
Yeah,
them. So we'll
that'd
keep
be
them all.
awesome.
And
Yeah.
Candace, let me give you the last word here. Anything that you want to leave us with, and then let us know how to get a hold of you once again. Always a
Okay.
pleasure.
Thank you. Yes, the thing I like to leave people with is just don't give up. Don't give up on your addict. Don't give up on yourselves in terms of you making some changes that need to be made. Don't give up, because there's hope. This is not a hopeless, helpless, powerless situation. It just isn't. So that's what I'd like to leave you with if you're a family member or an addict, because, I'm proof of the fact that you can change. And you can get a hold of me at lovewithboundaries.com. We offer a free 30-minute consultation. It's absolutely free and no strings attached. We hear what's going on for you. We tell you how we work. We see whether that's a fit. All you have to do to get that free call with us is to fill out a short questionnaire. It's on the website. And we do all of our work on Zoom. So we have clients all over the world. We have clients in Bali, in Hong Kong, in Australia. You know, as long as you speak English, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, we can work with you if you would like some help. So lovewithboundaries.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Candace Plattor Show. What a great show. And thanks for everyone that wrote in. Okay, Candace, we'll see you next week at 3:00.
Okay.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.